Psalm 37, 32, 40. The wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him. Hawa will not leave him in his hand, nor condemn him when he is judged. Wait on Hawa and keep his way, and he shall exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you shall see it. I have seen the wicked in great power, and spreading himself like a native green tree. Yet he passed away, and behold, he was no more. Indeed, I sought him, but he could not be found. Mark the blameless man, and observe the upright, for the future of that man is peace. But the transgressors shall be destroyed together. The future of the wicked shall be cut off. But the salvation of the righteous is from Hawa. He is their strength in the time of trouble. And Hawa shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them, because they trust in him. So Israel, know that you will be exalted and you will inherit the land from the wicked that was taken away long before. We've been here, declared the Empress, explaining that the original Native Americans were mostly of dark complexion. She said the light-skinned Indians of Hollywood fame were minority tribes in Northwest that were mixed with the blood of Chinese invaders. They made up less than a third of the total population of Indians on this land. White folks don't owe black people in America 40 acres and a mule. They need to get off our land or start paying us some rent and taxes, she said. A picture of Old Buffalo, and to the right, Chief Ignacio. On the right, we have Emma J. Mitchell Safford, a descendant of Massasoit, a direct descendant of Massasoit from Massachusetts. In the middle, we have a historic photograph of a Wampanoag Native American. You can see the symbol of the swastika before it was hijacked on his clothes near his belly. You can see it there, obviously, before it was hijacked by Hitler. And on the left, we have Love Prince, a Chippewaquitic Wampanoag Native American. And I just wanted you to read to you about James Pearson Beckwourth. It says he lived during 1798 to 1868. Let's read the orange part right here. It says Beckwourth's life with the Crow. In about 1828, while on trapping expedition with Jim Bridger, Beckwourth was captured by a party of Crow warriors. By Beckwourth's account, he was mistaken for the long-lost son of Big Bull, one of the tribal chieftains, and adopted into the tribe. Independent accounts make it seem more likely that his time with the Crow Nation was prearranged with the Rocky Mountain Fur Company for the purposes of establishing trade. Alright, so let's stop here. So obviously, why would the Indians, if they don't look nothing like him, why would they mistake him for the long lost son of their chief Big Bull? Why would they mistake a foreigner, a so-called African, right, or a so-called Negro, right, for their big long-lost son if he didn't look like them? The Crow are very dark and very copper-colored, all right. And you see, there's other accounts that it was prearranged, so they knew. There could have been another story where they already knew he was in one of the Indians or from that tribe, or even the son they had kidnapped maybe when he was young, and they prearranged it, all right. So Wikipedia tells us that James Pearson Beckwourth, born James Beckwourth and generally known as Jim Beckwourth, was an American mountain man fur trader and explorer, a mulatto. Alright, dodge the hijack right there. Mulatto born into slavery in Virginia. So he was born into slavery in Virginia and he's a mulatto. Alright, he was freed by his father and master and apprenticed to a blacksmith. Later, he moved to the American West as a fur trader. He lived with the Crow Nation for years. He is credited with the discovery of Beckwourth's Pass through the Sierra Nevada mountains between present-day Reno, Nevada and Portola, California, during the California Gold Rush years, and improved the Beckwourth Trail, which thousands of settlers followed to Central California. All right, so according to Wikipedia, he was born into slavery, a mulatto. All right, so going back to the story here, the account of James Beckwourth, it says, whatever the reason, Beckwourth spent the next 6 to 8 years with the Crow and gained considerable influence with the tribe. There are many documents from his contemporaries which confirm his position of a leadership with the Crow. He apparently rose within the ranks to at least the level of war chief, and by his own account was named head chief of the Crow Nation upon the death of Arapuish, Rotten Belly. So not only did they take in a so-called slave from Africa into their tribe, and they mistake them for the long lost son of Big Bull, but also later on he became their chief. Come on, how stupid do they think we are? I mean, if you really you got to see how they play with history here. You got to start waking up to see how they've been playing us this whole time. All right, so common sense will tell us this Indian tribe is not going to take a complete stranger, especially a foreigner, somebody who doesn't look like them, and mistake him as one of theirs, especially the son of the chief, and then make him chief later on. That doesn't just happen. I don't think that happened like that. I mean, no. All right, so just wanted to point this out to you regarding James Pearson Beckwourth. All right, let's continue. The Californians. Their height rarely exceeds 5 feet 8 inches and is more frequently 5 feet 4 or 5 inches, and although strongly, they are seldom symmetrically built. A low, retreating forehead, black deep-set eyes, thick, bushy eyebrows, salient cheekbones, a nose depressed at the root, and somewhat wide, spreading at the nostrils. A large mouth with thick prominent lips. Teeth large and wide, but not always regular, and rather large ears is the prevailing type. Their complexion is much darker than that of the tribes farther north, often being nearly black. Often being nearly black, so that with their bushy hair, which is frequently cut short, they present very uncouth appearance. Again, what I just read was from the book The Native Races of the Pacific States of North America by Hubert Howie Bancroft. This is volume 1. He has like 5 volumes of this, and then like another series of the native races titled Native Races, and that's like another 5-6 volumes. So very good book. Let's go ahead and look inside. So like towards the appendix of this book in the very beginning, I wanted to read this part. It says, Dr. Pritchard considers the American race psychologically as neither superior nor inferior to other primitive races of the world. Alright, so they're not inferior to any other race of the world. Boris de St. Vincent classifies Americans into 5 species, including the Eskimos. The Mexicans he considers as cognate with the Malays. Alright, so when he says Malays, what is he talking about? Because we gotta understand that the original Malays, this is kind of what they look like. Alright, so he's comparing the Mexican as cognate with the Malays, he says. Continuing, Humboldt characterizes the nations of America as one race by their straight glossy hair, thin beard, swarthy complexion, and cranial formation. Again, if we remember from video 1, swarthy means black, especially when they're talking about skin. Swartz or Schwartz, swarthy. And continuing, Schoolcraft makes 4 groups. The first extending across the northern end of the continent, the second tribes living east of the Mississippi, the third those between the Mississippi and the Rocky Mountains, and the fourth those west of the Rocky Mountains. All these he subdivides into 37 families, but so far as those on the Pacific coast are concerned, he might as reasonably have made of them twice or half the number. It was obvious to Europeans when they first beheld the natives of America that these were unlike the intellectual white-skinned race of Europe, the barbarous blacks of Africa, or any nation or people which they had hitherto encountered, yet were strikingly like each other. So he's saying they weren't like the white Europeans or like the black barbarous Africans. Barbaria, North Africa. Into whatever part of the newly discovered lands they penetrated, they found a people seemingly one in color, physiognomy, customs, and in mental and social traits. Their vestiges of antiquity and their languages presented a coincidence which was generally observed by early travelers. Alright? Hence, physical and psychological comparisons are advanced to prove ethnological resemblances among all the peoples of America, and that they, meanwhile, possess common peculiarities totally distinct from the nations of the Old World. Morton and his conferers, the originators of the American homogeneity theory, even go so far as to claim for the American man as origin as indigenous as that of the fauna and flora. Alright, so they're saying that, the Native Americans are very, very ancient. They go back even to when their fauna and flora, right, the species that were aboriginal to the land as well, they go that far back with the species, the plant life and the animals. They classify all the tribes of America, exceeding only the Eskimos who wandered over from Asia, as the American race, and divided into the American family and the Toltecan family. Toltecan, the son of Issachar. Tol. So again, I just want to emphasize what they just said. It says they classify all the tribes of America, excepting only the Eskimos, who wandered over from Asia, and that's what we've been trying to explain to everybody. That's most of the so-called Native Americans of today in the reservations are these Asians he is talking about that crossed over from Asia. Mongoloid stock. Blumenbach classifies the Americans as a distinct species. The American Mongolidae of Dr. Latham are divided into Eskimos and American Indians. Dr. Morton perceives the same characteristic lineaments in the face of the Fuegian and the Mexican. The Fuegian, and its tribes inhabiting the Rocky Mountains, the Mississippi Valley, and Florida. So it's interesting that they're comparing all these North American tribes with Fuegians, or these Patagonian Indians. Patagonia is down there in South America, almost in the tip in the bottom, Argentina, Chile, Tierra del Fuego, right? As you can see, this is another native from there. And I want to read this to you. It says here, natives of Patagonia, Darwin's Voyages. It says, credit to Paul D. Stewart, Science Photo Library. It says, caption 1882. Chromolithograph from the Comprehensive Atlas in Geography of the World, published by Blackie and Son, London, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. This plate clearly derives its inspiration from the uncolored frontispiece plate in volumes 1 and 2 of the Voyages of the Adventures in Beagle by Fitzroy and King, 1839. The third volume being that by Darwin. All the authors on the Beagle describe the profound effect meeting the Patagonians. All figures left of the dog. And then it says, in particularly the Fuegians on the right. See on the right, so the guy, he looks kind of, well, he does look dark copper, but then his face is a little pink. They try to lighten it up, but they're especially the Fuegians. Darwin, in old age, reported that the astonishment which I felt on first seeing a party of Fuegians on a wild and broken shore will never be forgotten by me, for the reflection at once rushed to my mind. Such were our ancestors. So even Darwin went, I guess, to visit that part of the world in his time, and he said they're aboriginal, our ancestors. So he didn't say, oh, these are Africans. Alright, so now they're comparing in the other book, Fuegians to the Mexicans, some of the Mississippians, some of the tribes in the Rocky Mountains. Alright, so what does that mean? Aboriginal. Alright, not from Africa, Aboriginal. So this is another tribe in the Americas, the Fuegians. You guys can follow up on that. Let's go continue with the book. So again, Dr. Morton perceives the same characteristic lineaments in the face of the Fuegian and the Mexican, and in tribes inhabiting the Rocky Mountains, the Mississippi Valley, and Florida. Okay, again, just like the Fuegian, he's saying. The same osteological structure, swarthy color, or black color, or copper color, so-called Negro, right? Straight hair, meager beard, obliquely cornered eyes, prominent cheekbones, and thick lips. Thick lips are common to them all. All right. All right, and continuing with the book, it says here, it has been observed by Professor von Martius that the literary and architectural remains of the civilized tribes of America indicate a higher degree of intellectual elevation than is likely to be found in a nation emerging from barbarism. So they're clearly telling you they're too sophisticated, too intelligent, they have too much science. You know, there's knowledge here, there's civilizations here. These are not barbaric people. They're not savages, as we've been told. Continuing in the bottom says, the great variety of climate which characterizes America could not fail to produce various habits of life. The half-torpid Hyperborean, the fierce warrior hunter of the vast interior forest, the sluggish, swarthy natives of the tropics, again swarthy, black, natives of the tropics, and the intelligent Mexican of the tableland, slowly developing into civilization under the refining influences of arts and letters. And it keeps going, but as you can see, very civilized and intelligent. Pickering assigns the limits of the American Malay or Toltecan family to California and western Mexico. So he's saying these are the same families. He is of the opinion that they crossed from the southeastern Asia by way of islands of the Pacific and landed upon this continent south of San Francisco, there being no traces of them north of this point. So he's telling you they didn't migrate through the Bering Strait, right? So I mean, he sees a very much resemblance to the southeastern Malaysians of Asia, you know, the copper-colored ones. And so he thinks that they're from there, but they could be all remnants of the sunken land of Mu, right? That's supposed to be in the Pacific Ocean. All right, so Lemuria, Mu. The Californians, therefore, he calls Malays. So he's comparing these people with the Malays again. And he continues, and the inhabitants of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon, he classifies as Mongolians. So they're a little different, he's saying, right? Californians, in the eyes of this traveler, differ from their northern neighbors in complexion, physiognomy. The only physiological test that Mr. Pickering was able to apply in order to distinguish the Polynesian in San Francisco from the native Californian was that the hair of the former was wavy, while that of the latter was straight. Are you hearing that? Both have more hair than the Oregonian. So he's saying I'm telling you straight up, there's two different types of copper-colored tribes there in California that look, one of them Polynesian with the wavy hair, and then another copper-colored tribe which has straight hair. And he says both have more hair than the Oregonian. The skin of the Malay of the Polynesian islands and that of the Californian are alike. Okay, the skin. He's not saying anything else but the skin. He's saying, look, particularly the skin, right? Again, it says are very dark. Three other analogous characteristics were discovered by Mr. Pickering. Both have an open countenance, one wife, and no tomahawk. On the other hand, the Mongolian from Asia and the Oregonian are of a lighter complexion. They're different and exhibit the same general resemblances that are seen in the American and Asiatic Eskimos. All right, different. All right, so if we remember from the first video that was correlating with what we just read, basically, that anthropologists have long puzzled over why Native Americans don't look more like their ancient ancestors. All right. So we just saw the difference, right, between the Mongoloid Asian and the copper-colored tribes that were in California and these other areas of America, right? So it says that they're puzzled, who migrated into the Americas during the Pleistocene, the epoch that encompassed the last ice age and that ended about 12,000 years ago. So it says the ancient skulls are larger, their faces are narrower and more forward projecting, just like he said in the book, and they more closely resemble native peoples of Africa, Australia, and southern Pacific Rim than they do their supposed American descendants. And we correlated with that as well in the book, how they look like Aboriginal Australians and South Pacific Malaysians, the Fijians, right, and Tierra de Fuego down there in South America, and how they're relating Fijians to Californians and some of the Mexicans and Rocky Mountain tribes and Mississippi tribes. All right, remember that. So more correlation here. I just wanted to show this from part one, so we can see we got it in historical books and we have scientific anthropology proving this. I don't know what people that are bringing their static are arguing. So, you know, don't kill the messenger. You know, contact National Geographic. Ask them, hey, why are you saying that the oldest bones in America found resemble Africans, Australians, and Southern Pacific Rim people? Why are you saying that? So let's continue with the book. In general, the Toltecan family may be described as of good stature, well proportioned, rather above medium size, of a light copper color, as having long black obliquely pointed eyes, regular white teeth, glossy black hair, thin beard, prominent cheekbones, thick lips, large aquiline nose, and retreating forehead. A gentle expression about the mouth is blended with severity and melancholy in the upper portion of the face. They are brave, cruel in war, sanguinary in religion, and revengeful. They are intelligent, possess minds well adapted to the pursuit of knowledge, and at the time of the arrival of the Spaniards were well advanced in history, architecture, mathematics, and astronomy. Alright, you hear that? How intelligent these people were. This is the old world, ancient Egypt. They just found 60,000 structures, or they just released it to us actually last week, 2 weeks ago, in the beginning of February, that they found 60,000 structures in the Guatemalan jungle. And that's just a little part they scanned. They had this new LiDAR technology. Go ahead and research it, check it out. A lot is going to be revealed soon. But again, these people, when I say who does that sound like, you know, they're revengeful. They're, you know, sanguinary in religion. It says cruel in war, but they're brave. All right, you know, we know Joshua had to conquer Jerusalem, and he went in there with the sword. And before that, he went to a lot of towns and cities and, you know, cleansed the land. All right, but these people are also very scientific, right? Mathematics and astronomy. They constructed aqueducts, extracted metals, carved images in gold, silver, and copper. They could spin, weave, and dye. They could accurately cut precious stones. They cultivated corn and cotton, agriculture, the start of civilization. Built large cities, greater, 5 times greater than London and Rome, American Holocaust book. Constructing their buildings of stone and lime, made roads and erected stupendous tumuli. They constructed highways. You'll see that in the new findings they found over in the jungle in Guatemala. Highways and fortifications around their cities. It is common for those unaccustomed to look below the surface of things, to regard Indians as scarcely within the category of humanity. Indians, especially, is this the case when we, maddened by some treacherous outrage, some diabolic act of cruelty, hastily pronounce them incorrigibly wicked, inhumanly malignant, a nest of vipers, the extermination of which is a righteous act. Alright, so you're hearing what he's saying? How they condemn you as a savage, right? And then bring their civilized Christianity and force you on it. Alright, they destroy you, they kill you, they say that you are not human. You know, they take your land, you know, with diabolic act, and cruelty, right? And wicked, inhumanly malignant plans they had. Vipers they were. The extermination of which is a righteous act. They did it because they used their religion against you so they can feel, so they can sleep better at night. All of which may be true, but judged by this standard, has not every nation on earth incurred the death penalty? Human nature is in no wise changed by culture. The European is but a whitewashed savage. The European is but a whitewashed savage. Hey, I didn't say it. Neanderthal? Is that what he's talking about? A whitewashed savage. Civilized venom is no less virulent than savage venom. Right? Civilized venom. It ill becomes the full-grown man to scoff at the ineffectual attempts of the little child, and to attempt the cure of its faults by killing it. No more is it a mark of benevolent wisdom in those favored by a superior intelligence, with the written records of the past from which to draw experience and learn how best to shape their course for the future, to carry down the untaught man of the wilderness, deny him a place in this world or the next, denounce him as a scourge, an outlaw, and seize upon every light pretext to assist him off the stage from which his doom is so rapidly removing him. Who does that sound like? Scourge him as an outlaw, seize upon him every light pretext to assist him off the stage from which his doom is so rapidly removing him. It has been removed. We view man in his primitive state from a wrong standpoint at the outset. In place of regarding savages as one common humanity with ourselves and the ancestors perhaps of people higher in the scale of being, and more intellectual, he's talking about himself, right, than Europeans, than any of the world has yet seen, and actually any of the world has seen yet. We place them among the common enemies of mankind, and regard them more in the light of wild animals than of wild men. Alright, so remember that. You are more intellectual than any that the world has seen yet. So wake up. Are you remembering? Let's continue. Some ethnologists see in the Californians a stock different from that of any other American race. But the more I dwell upon the subject, the more convinced I am that, except in the broader distinctions, specific classifications of humanity are but idle speculations. Their height rarely exceeds 5 feet 8 inches and is more frequently 5 feet 4 or 5 inches, and although strongly, they are seldom symmetrically built. A low retreating forehead, black, deep-set eyes, thick, bushy eyebrows, salient cheekbones, a nose depressed at the root, and somewhat wide spreading at the nostrils, a large mouth with thick prominent lips, teeth large and white but not always regular, and rather large ears is the prevailing type. And who did that just describe? Their complexion is much darker than that of the tribes farther north, much darker, often being nearly black, or black, so-called black, right? Copper colored. So that with their matted bushy hair, sounds like braids to me, or dreadlocks, which is frequently cut short, they present a very uncouth appearance. So basically, I just wanted to show you like the references in these small letters right here. You see, that's basically all the references. Before that, it says the question of beard has been much muted. Some travelers asserting that they are bearded like Turks. So even beards, right? Most Mongoloid or Asian people, they don't have so much beard. All right. So these sources, it says it. At Bodega Bay, they are ugly and brutish race, many with Negro profiles, many with Negro profiles. This is ID page 103. They are physically an inferior race and have flat, unmeaning features, long, coarse, straight black hair, big mouths, and very dark skins. Revere's Tour, page 120. Large and strong, their color being the same as that of the whole territory. Morrill's Journal, page 47. It is said of the natives of the Sacramento Valley that their growth is short and stunted. They have short, thick necks and clumsy heads. The forehead is low, the nose flat with broad nostrils, the eyes very narrow and showing no intelligence, according to them, right? The cheekbones prominent and the mouth large. The teeth are white, but they do not stand in even rows, and their heads are covered by short, thick, rough hair. Short, thick, rough hair. Who is that? Their color is dirty, yellowish brown. That's their best description. Dirty, yellowish brown. In their racist views. Pfeiffer's Second Journal, page 307. This race of Indians is probably inferior to all others on the continent. Many of them are diminutive in stature, but they do not lack muscular strength, and we saw some who were tall and well formed. Their complexion is dark mahogany. Again, dark mahogany, or often nearly black. Their face is round or square, with features approximating nearer to the African than the Indian. Alright? This is in a historical, anthropological account book from this scholar. Alright? And he's actually using other sources here, not just his source. A wide, enormous mouth, nose is nearly flat, and hair straight. And the sources continue, says, in general, fine stout men, a great diversity of physiognomy was noticeable. It says Pickery's Races in U.S. XX, volume 9, page 105, 107. On the Sacramento were fine, robust men of low stature and badly formed. Wilkes' narration, I guess, in U.S. volume 5, page 198. The mouth is very large and the nose broad and depressed, chiefly distinguished by their dark color. Alright, they're chiefly distinguished by their dark color. Broad faces, a low forehead. Haley, Ethnologies, volume 6, page 222, says their features are coarse, broad, and of a dark chocolate color. Dark chocolate color. How more specific can that be? Taylor in California Farmer says November 2nd, 1860. At Drake's Bay, just above San Francisco, the men are commonly so strong of body that they, which 2 or 3 of our men could hardly bear, and one of them will take upon his back, and without grudging carry it easily away, uphill and downhill, an English mile together. It says Drake's World in Compass, I guess, page 131. Los naturales de este sitio y puerto son algo trigueños por los quemados del sol. It says the inhabitants of this area are dark color. Trigueño in Spanish is almost like saying a dark skin, dark color, because of the sun. It says por lo quemado del sol. La vida de Junipero, Sarah, page 215. Ugly, stupid, and savage. Otherwise they are well formed, tolerably tall, and of a dark brown complexion. So even though he's pointing out his racist views, right, he's being completely honest. You can see he's saying ugly, stupid, and savage, right? That's what he thinks, honestly, of them. But he's also letting us know, honestly, that they are of a dark brown complexion, and that's going to come back to bite his ass, right? The women, he continues, are short and very ugly. They have much of the Negro in their countenance. Alright, so this guy's a very honest guy. And now he's saying the women have much of the Negro in their countenance. Come on, let's wake up. Even more sources. It says very long, smooth, and coal black hair. Cousin View's Voyage, volume 1, page 282 and 3. They all have very savage look and are of a very dark color. Again, very dark color, all of them. Chimizo in Kosebu's Voyage, volume 3, page 47. Ill-made, their face is ugly, presenting a dull, heavy, and stupid countenance, according to his racist view. Vancouver's Voyage, volume 2, page 13. The Cholovoni tribe, the fur becoupe de tous les... Okay. That's in French, so we're going to skip that. It says the Alcones are of good height, and the Tularois were thought to be generally above the standard of Englishmen. Their complexion is much darker than that of the South Sea Islanders. It's much darker actually than the South Sea Islanders. You hear that? And their features far inferior in beauty. Beechey's Voyage, Volume 2, page 76. At Santa Clara, they are of a blackish color. Again, in Santa Clara, they are of blackish color. They have flat faces, thick lips, and black coarse straight hair. Kosebu's New Voyage, Volume 2, page 98. Their features are handsome and well proportioned. Their countenances are cheerful and interesting. So this guy has a totally different view, you see? Morrow's Voyage, page 212. At Placerville, they are most repulsive looking wretches. They are nearly black, and are exceedingly ugly according to his racist views. Borthwick's 3 years in is that Khalifa or California, page 128. In the Yosemite Valley, they are very dark colored. In Yosemite Valley, Yosemite National Park, they are very dark colored, the aboriginals from there, and the women are perfectly hideous according to Neelan's book. And continuing even more correlation, it says here, at San Jose the men are almost all rather above the middling stature and well built. Very few indeed are what may be called undersized. Their complexions are dark but not Negro-like. Some seem to possess great muscular strength. They have very coarse black hair, coarse. Some of the women were more than 5 feet 6 inches in height. And speaking of the Californian Indians in general, they are of a middling or rather of a low stature and of a dark brown color, approaching to black. What does all this mean? Large projecting lips and broad flat Negro-like noses. Again, large projecting lips and broad flat Negro-like noses. Who are they describing? They're describing you. Very strong resemblance to the Negroes. A very strong resemblance. It is so-called Negroes. None of the men we saw were above 5 feet high. They are certainly the worst type of savage I have ever seen. Lord Natural, Volume 1, page 249. More swarthy in complexion and of less stature than those east of the Rocky Mountains. So more swarthy in complexion than the ones in the Rocky Mountains, says there. More of the Asiatic cast of countenance than the Eastern tribe. Delano's Life on the Plains, page 304. And in the bottom it says, low foreheads and skins, as black as Guinea Negroes. As black as Guinea Negroes. And we're going to see later on in the next part, when they're comparing them to Guinea, who was really in the coast of Guinea, that's what they're saying, and who was actually in Guinea being brought over there by Spanish and Portuguese. All right, a lot of Native Americans. We're gonna see that later. All right, so that's why they resemble. And just a few more sources. It says here, skin of such a deep reddish brown, that it seems almost black. It seems almost black to them because it's a deep reddish brown. They have no words for it, right? Figures human race, page 493. That's where you can find that. Bushmen's spurring their Aztecs. They're talking about the Aztecs. On page 528. Forbes of California, page 180. All right. Harper's Monthly, volume 13, page 583. All those books say the same thing, a deep reddish brown that seems almost black. All right, a fine set of men who, though belonging to different nationalities, had very much the same outward appearance, so that when you have seen one, you seem to have seen them all. All right, so they're all copper colored. Pin and Siemens Doddings, page 15. It says their average height is about 5 feet 4 or 5 inches. They are but slimly built and possess but little muscular development. Light brownish red color. So you see all the shades of different brown and so-called black and copper color that we're getting, right? All these different descriptions, the heights, the way they're built, muscular, some are not, right? So there's different nations there, but general rule is that they're all copper colored, right? Most of them. Some have a Chinese cast of countenance. Rusty black hair. Smart in Smithsonian Rep 1867, page 418. Their features were flat Negro-like, small-legged, big-bellied, and broad shoulders. Again, Negro-like. Emery's Reconnaissance, page 52. More miserable-looking objects I've never beheld. Legs, large and muscular. Freeman and Emery's Notes of Travels, page 139. And continue with the book. It says, the Pimas and their neighbors are men of fine physique, tall and bony, many of them exceeding 6 feet in height, broad-chested, erect, and muscular, but frequently light-limbed, with small hands. Though the feet of both sexes are large, they have large features expressive of frankness and good nature, with prominent cheekbones and aquiline nose, those of the women being somewhat retroussed. The females are symmetrically formed, with beautifully tapered limbs, full bust, pleasing features, embellished with white, evenly set teeth. Their coarse hair grows to a great length and thickness. Coarse hair. And their dark complexion becomes yet darker towards the south. The natives of the Valley of Mexico are represented by some authorities as tall, by others as of short stature. But from what I gather, we may conclude that on the whole they are over rather than under the middle height, well made and robust. In Veracruz they are somewhat shorter, say from 4 feet 6 inches to 5 feet at most, and clumsily made, having their knees further apart from Europeans, and walking with their toes turned in. The women are shorter than the men and become fully developed at a very early age. In Jalisco, both sexes are tall. They are also well built, and among the women are found many forms of such perfection that they might well serve as models for sculpture. Alright, you hear that? Throughout the tablelands, the men are muscular and well proportioned. Their skin is very thick and conceals the actions of the muscles. They are out-kneed, turn their toes well in, and their carriage is anything but graceful. Various opinions have been advanced by competent persons in regards to the features of the natives of Mexico. Baron von Humboldt describes them as resembling the aborigines of Canada, Peru, Florida, and Brazil. Having elongated eyes, the corners turned toward the temples, prominent cheekbones, large lips, and sweet expression about the mouth, forming a strong contrast with their otherwise gloomy and severe aspect. Rosie says that their eyes are oval, and that their physiognomy resembles that of the Asiatics. According to Prescott, they bear a strong resemblance to the Egyptians, and Violet Lecout asserts that the Malay type predominates. So according to this Prescott, they resemble the Egyptians? Alright. They have generally a very narrow forehead, an oval face, long black eyes set wide apart, large mouth with thick lips, teeth white and regular, the nose small and rather flat. Again, they're talking about the Mexicans, right? The general expression of the countenance, impaired to a very advanced age. Long, straight, black, thick, and glossy hair is common to all. Black, thick hair. Their beard is thin, and most of them, especially in the capital and its vicinity, have a small mustache. But very few, if any, have hair on their legs, thighs, or arms. It is very seldom that a gray-haired native is found. All the people referred to are remarkable for their strength and endurance, which may be judged of by the heavy burdens they carry on their backs. The inhabitants of the tablelands are of various hues. Some are olive, some brown, others of a red copper color. In the Sierras, some have a bluish tint as if dyed with indigo. Alright? You hear that? The natives of the Tierras Calientes are of a darker complexion, inclining to black. There are some called Indios Pintos, whose cuticle is a less deep color, inclining more to yellowish and marked with dark copper colored spots. So various hues, again different types of shades of these copper colored, right? Continuing further along, it says married men and women wear straw hats with high pointed crowns and broad turned up rims. Near the top is a narrow and handsomely woven band of many colors with long tassels. Their long bushy hair, alright, their long bushy hair is secured tightly round the crown of the head with a bright woolen ribbon. Many of the men do up their hair in queues with worsted ribbons with heavy tassels that hang below the waist. It says in Durango the natives were accustomed to rub their swarthy bodies with clay of various colors and paint reptiles and other animals thereon. Again, swarthy bodies, black bodies. And continuing, it says in the village of Tequisistlan, Oaxaca, shortly after the Spanish conquest, they were all reported as of gigantic stature. The Juaves present a different appearance from any of other natives of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. They are generally well made and of strong constitutions. The natives of Tabasco who dwell in the country bordering on the river of that name are of medium height and with well-developed limbs. Both men and women have round flat faces, low foreheads, small eyes, flattish noses, thick lips, again thick lips, small but quite full mouths, white teeth, and tawny complexions or tanny complexions, right? Like a tan, so dark skin. That's another word they use, tanny or tawny. The Archeological are rather under the middle height but of great physical strength. They have a low narrow forehead, salient cheekbones, full lips, white teeth, small beard, and coarse hair. Coarse hair again. Their features are aquiline and the expression of the countenance is melancholy. One of the gentleness blended with sternness. They strongly resemble the descendants of the Aztecs of Mexico, who are also copper colored. The women are more delicately made, and some beautiful ones are seen among them. They move quickly and with much natural grace. The descendants of the Mayas are of medium size, with good limbs, large faces and mouth, the upper lip slightly arched, and a marked tendency to stoutness. The nose is somewhat flat, even sleepy looking, and hair black and glossy, which rarely turns gray. Complexion of a copper color, again copper color, and in some instances yellowish. Naturally strong, the Maya or the Yucatec can carry heavy loads long distances and perform a great deal of hard labor without showing signs of fatigue. Alright, that's good to know because it tells us that they had to replace, right? They tell us in history that they had to replace the Native American slaves with African slaves because they couldn't last. But right here it's telling us that the Maya can, perform a great deal of hard labor without showing signs of fatigue. So who were they really bringing over to the plantations and calling African? Alright. The Guatemalans, that is to say the aborigines of Guatemala, Salvador, and Nicaragua, are rather below the middle size, square and tough, with a finely developed physique. Their hue is yellow-brown, again yellow-brown, in some parts coppery, varying in shade according to locality, but lighter than that of the standard American type. So even this yellow-brown coppery native is still a little bit lighter than the standard American type, meaning that the standard American type is a lot darker. The full round face has a mild expression. The forehead is low and retiring, the cheekbones protruding, chin and nose short, the latter thick and flat, lips full, eyes black and small, turned upwards at the temples. The carriers of Guatemala use a rainproof palm leaf called suyacal. Shepherds are distinguished by a black and white checkered apron, somewhat resembling the Scotch kilt. You heard that, right? So they're not just naked savages, right? They have black and white checked apron. That sounds like a Masonic, how they have the check and white checkered floor, right? That's symbology. Now you see where they hijacked that from, right? Their hair, which before the conquest of Guatemala was worn long and hung in braids down the back, is now cut short. So their hair was long and hung in braids down the back. That sounds like almost like dreads. And even if it is braids, who wears braids? It's now cut and short, except in the remote mountain districts where long, loose hair is still the fashion. A little down towards the middle says, following the coast southward, we meet the Caribs, a strong, hardy but crude race at present of varied Negro admixture. Again, Negro admixture, whatever they mean by that. Chiefly descended from the turbulent natives of San Vicente Island, whom the English transported in 1796 to the island of Roatan, whence they were brought over to Honduras. The Caribs, who have within a few decades spread from a small colony over the whole northern coast, driving other nations into the interior and southward, appear to be superseding the aborigines, now fast disappearing under the annihilating effect of drink and disease. Continues, says the Caribs round Cape Gracias a Dios are the Sambos or Mosquitos proper, said to have sprung from the union of native women with Negro slaves. Alright, dodge the hijack, wrecked on the coast during the 17th century. So again, if we remember from discussing already the Beckwourth and the Mosquito Coast and how they actually escaped from Providence Island, the Beckwourth of New England, the New England natives, Americans. They were brought over by the Puritans to Providence Island, and from there in 1641 they managed to escape with some other Puritans to the coast of Honduras, to Gracias a Dios. Alright, so we know that these are not Negro slaves, so dodge the hijack, alright? But you see how they throw it in there, and you see how you have to actually check the sources and follow up on these so-called Negro slaves, or Africans as they call them, but they don't want to say they're Native Americans. Now they're saying they're Negro slaves, but once we know the real story, we see that they're Beckwourth Native Americans from New England. Continuing from this part of the world, it says race mixtures in certain localities have almost obliterated aboriginal types, which are portrayed as medium stature, regular form, and varying in color, from light brown to dark coppery. Again, from light brown to dark coppery, many shades. These people about Cape Gracias a Dios are represented by the first voyagers to have been nearly as dark as Negroes. Alright, so the first people who was arriving there, those first European voyagers, were describing these people in this region as dark as Negroes. Alright, how much correlation do we need? The face is rather flat and oval, the head smaller than among Europeans, forehead high, cheekbones not very prominent, hair long, straight, coarse, and black, beard scanty, nose very small, thin, and usually aquiline among the coast people, but larger and broader towards the interior. The Tocas and Ramas present the finest pure-blooded type, the former being very fair, while the latter are large, athletic, and stern-looking. The Poyas are copper-colored, short but muscular, broad-faced with large foreheads, bent nose, and small, mild eyes. The Tonglas are duskier. And duskier, if you start researching the etymology, it starts going into dark or black when they refer especially to skin. The Smos approach the fair Tocas in hue, though they have a flatter head, accompanied by a stolid look. The darkest of all are the Wulwas, whose color seems a mixture of yellow ochre and India ink. India ink, interesting. Proceedings to Honduras, we meet the Caribs, who varied admixture of Negro blood separates them into yellow and black Caribs. Alright, the former are distinguished by a somewhat ruddy hue. Ruddy hue. We already know what that means. With a hooked nose, while his duskier brother is taller, or darker brother, hardier and longer lived, with a nose inclining to aquiline. Children are prettier as they approach the Negro type. They're prettier as they approach the Negro type. You heard that, right? The hair varies in curl and gloss according to purity of blood. The Mosquitos proper are more uniform in appearance. The Buccaneers have no doubt assisted in bringing out many of the characteristics that have obtained for the Sambo race the leading position on the coast. They are all well built, raw-boned, nimble, and of a dull, dark copper color. Dark copper color. The face is oval with a coarse, lustful expression. The hair rough, it's rough and wavy and black. Eyes bright and remarkably strong. Women pretty with large eyes and small feet and ankles. And down towards the bottom is like another reference. It says strange ways. Mosquito Shores, page 329. The natives of Corn Island are of a dark copper color. Black hair, full round faces, small black eyes, their eyebrows hanging over their eyes, low foreheads, short thick noses, not high but flattish, full lips, and short chins. Dampier's Voyage, volume 1, page 31, 2, 7 to 8. Continuing, it says the people of northern Honduras wear a lock hanging over the forehead. A lock. So we just heard the type of hair the other Indians had, right? Rough and wavy. So what kind of lock is this? This is a dreadlock. Alright? Some highland chieftains, on the contrary, shave the front of the head but allow the back hair to grow long, while the poyas part theirs in the middle, keeping it in position with a band. That of the religious men reaches to the waist and generally falls in braids behind. Alright, you hear that? In mourning, both sides of the head are shaved, a bushy comb being left along the middle. A bushy comb left along the middle. And we're almost done with this book, but it says a notable difference between the Isthmians, they mean the people from like Panama to Costa Rica and a little bit of Nicaragua because it's an isthmus, and other aborigines of the Pacific states is the short, rather flat nose, contradistinction to the almost universal aquiline cast. In color, they are of a medium bronze tint, varying according to localities. The mountain tribes being the darker, alright? They're darker in the mountains. From bronze tint, imagine. Black, straight, and very abundant coarse hair. Coarse and abundant hair. Black or dark eyes and excellent teeth predominate. On his march across the isthmus in 1513, and he's again referencing to Panama, Costa Rica, Veragua, or Nicaragua, Vasco Nunez found some Negro slaves belonging to the cacique of Cuarecas. So the Indians had Negro slaves, but the owner could give no information relative to them. You hear that? So they say, according to them, they had no information, except that they were more of that color near the place, with whom they were continually at war. All right, so these were people that they knew, that was there with them, that lived near them, and that they were at war with, these so-called Negroes that they had as slaves. So that was a very informative and correlating book. Again, this was the book called The Native Races of the Pacific State of North America, from 1874 to 75 by Hubert Howe Bancroft. And this is the part right here where he's talking about the dark or so-called Negro Californians, copper-colored swarthy Californians. All right. And this is Winnipeg Jack of the Blackfoot Indian tribe. And as you can see, very dark copper-colored, as described in many of the books. Here on the left we have Yellow Bear, a chief from Kansas. In the middle we have Jana Kelegi, or Climbing Bear, a Cheyenne Indian. And on the right we have White Man Runs Him Uptown. Uptown, I guess that's his name. That's what I got from the internet. This is Chief Washaki and the other tribal members of the Shoshone tribe. As you can see, copper colored. Okay, over here to the left we have Wa Top Inat, not sure of the tribe. In the middle we have Wa Shung, he's a chief of the Kansas Indians. And over to the right we have Two Moons, he's a Cheyenne chief, as you can see. To the left here we have True Eagle. In the middle we have a Sioux Indian or Sioux Indian. And to the right another Sioux Indian or Sioux Indian from South Dakota doing one of their ceremony chants. This is a historic painting of the Jamacras, Native Americans meeting up with parliament or government. As you can see, they're very copper colored compared to the European settlers. Alright, and over here, over to the left, we have Strikes the Knife, Stab, with Bob Tail Bull. He's a Custer, one of the Custer Scout, killed that little bighorn, it says. In the middle we have Tall Bear, a medicine man. And over to the right we have a Shoshone Native American. As you can see, all very dark copper colored. Alright, I'm going to read from this book now. It's called The Indian Races of North and South America. This is by Charles D. Wolfe Brownell, published by Boston, Dayton, and Wentworth, 86 Washington Street in 1853. So I'm going to belly flop to page 16 of this book, and right here it says, "The great body of the American aborigines, notwithstanding the country over which they are distributed, have many features of physical conformation in common. The exceptions of this general truth exhibited principally in the persons of the Eskimos." So they're saying that most of the tribes look the same except these people of the Eskimos, right? Or the Siberian. And in certain white tribes of the West deserve a separate consideration at present. Our remarks will be confined to the red men, and particularly to those of the present United States and territories. Alright, so continuing a little bit more down, says the most distinguishing peculiarities of the race are the reddish or copper color of the skin, the prominence of the cheekbone, right? Cheekbone, and the color and quality of the hair. This is not absolutely straight, it's not straight, but somewhat wavy, alright? It's wavy and has not inaptly been compared to the mane of the horse. Less from its coarseness than from its glossy hue and the manner in which it hangs. Their eyes are universally dark. The women are rather short, with broader faces and a greater tendency to obesity than the men, but many of them possess a symmetrical figure with an agreeable and attractive countenance. And this picture is from chapter 3 of this book regarding the Nistiniks, or the Crees. It says these people possess all the ordinary characteristics of the American Indian: the copper complexion, black flowing hair, well-proportioned limbs, and keen black eyes. Travelers speak of women as being far more attractive in personal appearance than the generality of the squaws. Upon them devolves all the drudgery of domestic life, while the men devote their exclusive attention to hunting or war. So I just want to go ahead and continue in this page. It says, our author continues, their color is a copper tint, pleasing to the eye and the skin, where constantly covered from the sun, is little darker than that of the natives of southern Europe. Alright? So this is a little darker than the natives of the southern Europe. Their hair is straight and coarse, and continues perfectly black till an advanced period of life. The general expression of the face is pleasing, though it varies with the tribe and the disposition of each person. Their eyes are black and piercing, and generally slant upwards a little towards the temple, which would give an unpleasant expression to the face, were it not relieved by the sweet expression of the mouth. The forehead generally recedes, though in less degree than in the African. There is, however, much difference in this respect, and in some individuals it is well formed and prominent. And another part of this book, it says the Aborigines of Peru. Just gonna get to this part right here. Let me just look for it. And yeah, page 521. It says the Quichuas have beautifully soft, thick, and flowing hair, but are almost destitute of beards. Their complexion is a brown olive, again brown olive, entirely distinct from the reddish or copper hue of most of the North American Indians. It approaches that of the mulatto more nearly than that of the other American Aborigines, and is spoken of as singularly uniform. Alright, so these are referred to as mulatto, but of course there is no African ancestry here, so how are they mulatto? A mulatto supposed to be a mixture between a black person, so-called African or so-called Negro, and a light-skinned or white person, right? And more in South American Indians here, their natural figure and the conformation of their features seem from most accounts to be by no means unpleasant. Dwelling in a forest country, their complexion is fairer than that of many of the South American Indians. It is of light yellowish copper color, still copper color, and sufficiently transparent for a blush to be perfectly obvious. The stories of their frightful and hideous appearance may all be referred to one most barbarous custom of mutilation and deformity, prevalent among them from the earliest times. This is the insertion of large wooden plug or button called the botuk into a slit in the underlip. Similar appendages were worn at the ears. Alright, so you can see how they're almost describing a mulatto, because they're saying yellowish copper. Alright, so again, some of the drawings that we have in this book, and again, copper colored. Why would they draw them like this? This is actually the Indians. It says here, watching for salmon. Do you remember when you used to go to the rivers and watch for salmon in your habitat, in your land, and when you were free watching for salmon? And this book has other drawings, and most of them are, copper colored, as you can see here. Another one, I guess they're dancing there. And there's another one here with them on the horse. As you can see, it's all copper colored people, and they're not just drawing this for no reason. They were drawing what they were seeing. I will read from this book now: Race Relations in Virginia and the Miscegenation in the South, 1776 to 1860, by James Hugo Johnston. All right, so let me see. So let's start right here, right after it says schools. It says, in all the southern states there are found to be records of cases sent to the courts of appeals in which the litigants attempt to show that they are descendants of Indians and not of Negroes, and hence that they do not fall subject to the slave code. So you can see that from even a long time ago, there was a lot of so-called Negro people that were Indian fighting for their right to be recognized as an Indian, Native American, and that they didn't fall under that slave code laws that they had in the South. They didn't want to be slaves because there was a lot of Indians. Of course, there were so-called Negroes that were getting captured and made slaves. So it says, these cases add interest to the study of pedigree, but they must be considered as additional evidence of the extensive mixture of racial blood in the slave states. To the visitor in the South, the physical characteristics of many Negro slaves bore witness to their Indian origin. Again, so if you went to the South, he's clearly telling you that you would notice that the physical characteristics of many of the Negro slaves bore witness to their Indian origin. Alright, and it says, in the states of South Carolina, early Negro Indian history was much influenced by conditions that resulted from the occupation of the territory to the south by the Spanish. Alright, so the Spanish were causing all this havoc down there and getting all these Indian native people enslaved. From early times, the Spanish and their Indian allies in Florida stole South Carolina slaves and harbored runaways from the South Carolina plantations. Alright, so you see, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, how the Spanish had a big influence on the enslavement of the Native American. Again, this is from James Hugo Johnston, right? A 1937 doctoral dissertation at Virginia State University. I'm going to read from this book now. It's called The History of Hernan de Soto in Florida, of records of the events of 56 years from 1512 to 1568 by Barnard Ship, printed in 1881. Alright, so let's get into it. It says in chapter 8, it says, the number of leagues which the Spaniards traveled in Florida and a fight with the Indians of the coast. It says the Spaniards penetrated into Florida as far as to the fountains where the Chucagua takes its source. Agua is water in Spanish. And footnote says that the Chagua is the Mississippi River. The Spaniards crossed it about 100 miles by the river below Memphis. Alright, so that's the Mississippi they're talking about. So they went that far from Florida. It says this river to ascend from Aminoya, where was made the first embarkment as far as these fountains, is 300 leagues, and from this province to the sea 500. So that there extends altogether the distance of 800 leagues which our men traveled. It says during the 3 days that the Spaniards recruited themselves, they saw on the last day about noon, coming from a place full of reeds, 7 boats, which advanced towards them. There was in the first a very large and very black Indian, of an aspect very different from those who inhabit the interior of the country. So he's saying that he saw a very large and very black Indian. Put an expression, to the word black. Says very black, so he's emphasizing how black the Indian appeared to him. Alright, so what could that mean? The barbarians of the coast are black in this manner. So even the barbarians of the coast are black in this manner, which is very black, because the sun is there warmer than elsewhere, and because they are continually in the water, which is salt. For the land being dry and sterile, they are obliged to fish in order to subsist. When the Indian had approached the caravel near enough, he placed himself on the prow of his vessel, and in a voice full of haughtiness told the Spaniards. This book is called The Voyage of Discovery to the Strait of Magellan, with an account of the manners and customs of the inhabitants and the natural productions of Patagonia. This is by Admiral Don E. de Cordova, translated from Spanish. It says here. This is a very old book as well, and let's go into it. So on page 95 of this book, regarding a characteristic of some of the Indians he's inhabiting while he's traveling through the Strait of Magellan, which is in South America, it's somewhere in between Argentina and going into towards Chile, coming out on the other side. It's like a shortcut they take. So it says they are of ordinary size, rather inclining to middle stature. Their limbs are well proportioned, and they are very agile. Notwithstanding, they use very little exercise. Their complexion pale yellow, inclining to a copper color. Right, so when we gotta be careful when they're saying this pale yellow, they're trying to basically describe like a light-skinned copper-colored person, as they're saying here, inclining to a copper color. But some of them darker than others. So there is some that are darker than others. There is nothing either remarkably disgusting nor pleasing in their features. Their hair seems to be rather like that of horses and cattle than that of human creatures, which is probably occasioned by their having, and it continues somewhere with some bullshit, right? But you can see how they're talking about their hair as well, and they're saying it's not like the other or their hair, white people's hair. That's what they're basically saying. All right. This is a historic painting of Quipahualgua, the supreme commander of the Yuchi Indian nation, by German painter Philip George Friedrich in 1730s. It says, as you can see, copper colored, his depiction of her. Over to the left, we have a DNA search for the first Americans link Amazon group to indigenous Australians from video 1. Remember that? In the middle, we have a Ute boy. It says before 1926. The Ute are very copper colored. And over to the right, we have a female from the Tierra del Fuego. It says Savage, engraven from a drawing by Johann Ihl from Ebenezer Sibley's Universal System of Natural History, 1794. Tierra del Fuego is an archipelago off the southernmost tip of the South American continent, it says here. So as you can see, this is a portrait of Chief Littlehead from 1880. And this is another portrait of Chief White Bull from 1880 as well. Says, remembering Polly Parker, legendary 19th century Seminole. Parker reportedly jumped ship rather than move to Oklahoma and lived out her days in Florida. Rancher Bud Adams remembers seeing her on his family's ranch in the late 1930s. She was more than 100 years old. This is Native American Faces. Chief Keokuk, Sauk Indian, 1780 to 1848. It says Chief Keokuk Kiyokaga, one who moves about alert, of the Sauk tribe in central North America, was one of the men responsible for starting the Black Hawk War. He was a member of the Fox clan born on Rock River, Illinois. He was not a chief by birth, but rose to the command through ability and force of character. At an early age, he became a member of the Sauk Council and later stepped into prominence as a tribal guest keeper. His lodge soon became a center for all social and political affairs of the Keokuk, was able to use his office to further his own ambitions. He worked his will against custom in veiled diplomatic ways, secretly playing one faction against another. In time, he became the leading counselor in the Sauk Assembly and enjoyed great popularity among his people. And I want you to notice his picture, his necklace. If you watched the Black Panther movie, the new one that just came out, you see when he got crowned king, he was put the same kind of necklace around him. All the Black Panthers wore that, actually, all the kings of Wakanda. As you can see, this is not an African. Alright, so let's dodge the hijack. Let's continue. From the book Voyages and Travels, mainly during the 16th and 17th centuries, Volume 1, with an introduction by C. Raymond Beasley, it says, from the Westminster Archibald Constable and Co. Company, 1903. It says, at the time of our being there, the city of Santo Domingo was not above 500 households of Spaniards, but of the Indians dwelling in the suburbs there were more. The country is, most part of the year very hot and very full of a kind of flies or gnats with long bills, and it says in parentheses mosquitoes, which do prick and molest the people very much in the night when they are asleep, and prickling their faces and hands and other parts of their bodies that lie uncovered, and make them to swell wonderfully. So they are talking about mosquitoes. Also there is another kind of a small worm, which creepeth into the soles of men's feet, and especially of the black Moors, or in parentheses, Indians. So that he's referring to the Indians as black Moors, right? So how significant is that, right? Because we know that, they say there's a lot of Moors here before Columbus came, and yeah, I can believe that, but also know that Moors was, well, in the past was not just a certain people, but anybody of color. So look at the reference he's doing here. For the Indians, he's calling them black Moors because that's what he knew from where he was coming from. For black people, he knew that the black people in Europe were Moors and that they ruled Europe, and that's what he was used to. So he saw the Indians being black as well, or copper colored, so-called Negro, he called them black Moors. In parentheses, Indians. That's what he's talking about. They wouldn't put that in parentheses for no reason. And children which used to go barefoot, and maketh their feet to grow as big as man's head, and doth so ache that it would make one run mad. They have no remedy for the same, but to open the flesh, sometimes 3 or 4 inches, and so dig them out, it says. And again, in another part of the book, it says, I do remember that the last person that came out of the ship into the boat was a woman, black Moor, or Indian, in parentheses, so an Indian woman, a Native American, who leaping out of the ship into the boat with a young suckling child in her arms, leaped too short and fell into the sea, and was a good while under the water before the boat could come to rescue her, and with the spreading of her clothes rose above water again, and was caught by the coat and pulled into the boat, having still her child under her arm, both of them half drowned, and yet her natural love towards her child would not let the child go. And when she came aboard the boat, she held her child so fast under her arm still that 2 men were scant able to get it out. So you see that? Powerful, right? Powerful. So as you can see again, reference to a black Moor was actually to a Native American Indian. This book is called The Ancient Cities of the New World. Travels and Explorations in Mexico and Central America from 1857 to 1882 by Desiree Charnay. Alright, the London Chapman and Hall, Limited, 1887. And it says here, The Ancient Cities of the New World, page 132, the base of the torrent showing that the bed was narrower formerly than it is now, and that it was presumably embanked and spanned by several bridges. As we advance towards the Pyramid of the Sun, fragments of all kinds meet our eyes in every direction. The fields are strewn with pottery, masks, small figures, lyres, ex-votos, small idols, broken cups, stone axes, etc. I select for myself some masks, which portray the various Indian types with marvelous truth, and at times not without some artistic skill. So marvelous truth. Among them are types which do not seem to belong to America, a Negro, and it says here, see plate, and this is what they have in the next page. This is the plate I guess they're talking about seeing. You can see it says, whose thick lips, flat nose, woolen hair proclaim his African origin. Woolen hair, his African origin. Again, Dutch, the hijack. Like I said, I'm gonna keep reminding, they keep throwing the African word in there when they encounter a so-called Negro or copper-colored person and evidence to prove it. They have to throw it in there because that's all they know. Below this, a Chinese head, Caucasian and Japanese specimens, it says there. Heads with retreating foreheads like those displayed at Palenque, and not a few with Greek profiles, it says there. The lower jaw is straight or projecting. The face is smooth or bearded. In short, it is a wonderful medley, indicative of the numerous races who succeeded each other and amalgamated on this continent, which until lately was supposed to be so new, and is in truth so old. This is the old world. This is Atlantis. This is ancient Egypt. And here we go again. The ancient races were here. I would like to talk to you about George Catlin, his accounts and his books regarding the Native Americans that he encountered. He lived amongst them a lot. He was traveling through the different tribes, painting them, and his works are like in museums. This is a painting of him, a depiction of him, I guess, by William Fisk from 1849, and you can see that right next to him, a Native American, right, copper colored, right, and if you zoom in, you can see the very so-called Negro features just by looking at his hand. Look at the person behind them. They both got kind of like this red paint on their face. So even though the red paint looks dark, but even under him, you can see the copper color or the brown skin, right? It says here the painting of Stomach O Sucks, Buffalo Bull's back fat, a blood chief. The painting of Buffalo Bull's back fat is largely considered to be Catlin's finest work. It says Catlin began his journey in 1830 when he accompanied General William Clark on a diplomatic mission up the Mississippi River into Native American territory. St. Louis became Catlin's base of operations for 5 trips he took between 1830 and 1836. So, alright, by this time a lot has happened, a lot of enslavement of Native American people has happened, and a lot of hijacks already have come through. So, eventually visiting 50 tribes. 2 years later, he ascended the Missouri River over 3,000 kilometers to Fort Union Trading Post, near what is now the North Dakota-Montana border, where he spent several weeks among indigenous people who were still relatively untouched by European civilization. He visited 18 tribes, including the Pawnee, Omaha, and Ponca in the south, and in the Mandan, Hidatsa, Cheyenne, Crow, Assiniboine, and Blackfeet to the north. There, at the edge of the frontier, he produced the most vivid and penetrating portraits of his career. During later trips along the Arkansas, Red, and Mississippi rivers, as well as visits to Florida and Great Lakes, he produced more than 500 paintings and gathered a substantial collection of artifacts. Alright, so now we know how he painted them. I want you to see how he wrote about them. So it says here in the book, North American Indians, being letters and notes on their manners, customs, and conditions, written during 8 years' travel amongst the wildest tribes of Indians in North America. 1832 to 1839, again by George Catlin. This is volume 1 of this book. It has 2 volumes. Alright, 1880. And on belly flop into page 6 it says, so Herculean a task may fall to my lot at a future period, or it may not, but I send forth these volumes at this time, fresh and full of their living deeds and customs, as a familiar and unstudied introduction, at least to them in their native character, which I confidently hope will repay the readers who read for information and historical facts, as well as those who read but for amusement. So he's clearly tell you is that he's being very honest about what he's trying to write down and record, whether it's for the future or for his time. But he's basically telling us, if you want information and facts, that's what he's going to try to give you. Alright, the world know generally that the Indians of North America are copper colored. Right away, right? The whole world knows generally that the Indians of North America are copper colored. In those times, everybody knew that their eyes and their hair are black, etc. That they are mostly uncivilized and consequently unchristianized. Thus the hijack. That they are nevertheless human beings with features, thoughts, reason, and sympathies like our own. But few yet know how they live, how they dress, how they worship. What are their actions, their customs, their religion, their amusements, etc., as they practice them in the uncivilized regions of the uninvaded country, which is the main object of this work, clearly and distinctly to set forth. Alright, so let's read a couple parts of this book, and it says, it would be impossible at the same time in a book of these dimensions to explain all the manners and customs of these people, but as far as they are narrated, they have been described by my pen, upon the spot, as I have seen them transacted. All right. And if some few of my narratives should seem a little too highly colored, so he's saying, what does he mean by that? Little too highly colored. I trust the world will be ready to extend to me that pardon which is customary to yield to all artists whose main faults exist in the vividness of their coloring. So is he trying to say that, it's a little controversial because he's drawing them, copper colored, you know? Rather than in the drawing of their pictures, but there is nothing else in them. I think that I should ask pardon for even though some of them should stagger credulity and incur for me the censure of those critics who sometimes unthinkingly or unmercifully sit at home at their desk enjoying the luxury of wine and a good cigar over the simple narration of the honest and weather-worn traveler who shortens his half-starved life in catering for the world. Alright, you hearing this? To condemn him and his work to oblivion, and his wife and his little children to poverty and starvation, merely because he describes scenes which they have not beheld, and which consequently they are unable to believe. So you hear all this, what he's saying. He's saying that even though he's drawing and he's writing these accounts, it's what he's seeing, and even though it's going to create controversy, that's what he's going to do. Alright, that's what he's trying to basically explain here. That's what I get from it. Continuing, the Indians of North America, as I have before said, are copper colored. Again, copper colored, with long black hair, black eyes, tall, straight, and elastic forms, are less than 2 millions in number, were originally the undisputed owners of the soil, and got their title to their lands from the Great Spirit who created them on it. So where did they get their title for the land? From Hawa, from the Most High, the Great Spirit. So they are aboriginal to this land, and this land is theirs, given to them, right? The lots were split. Do you guys remember that? And it continues, says, were once a happy and flourishing people, enjoying all the comforts and luxuries of life which they knew of, and consequently cared for. Were 16 million in numbers, and sent that number of daily prayers to the Almighty and thanks for His goodness and protection. So he's saying if there were 16 million, that's how many prayers were going daily. All of them were giving thanks to the Most High, or Hawa, right, for His goodness and His protection. Who does that sound like? And continuing in another part of the book, it says here, the stature of the Mandans is rather below the ordinary size of man, with beautiful symmetry of form and proportion, and wonderful suppleness and elasticity. They are pleasantly erect and graceful, both in their walk and their attitudes, and the hair of the men, which generally spreads over their backs, falling down to the hams and sometimes to the ground, is divided into plates or slabs. Divided into plates or slabs? What is he trying to say? Of 2 inches in width, and filled with profusion of glue and red earth or vermilion at intervals of an inch or two, which becoming very hard, remains in an unchanged from year to year. So what is he talking about when he's describing this? This to me sounds like dreadlocks. Alright, remains unchanged from year to year, and they become very hard, a profusion of glue red earth. They're divided in plates or slabs. What is he telling us? These are dreadlocks. To me, these are dreadlocks. And just to corroborate with what I'm saying, this is one of the drawings in his book, one of the illustrations, and as you can see, look at the hair of these Native Americans. All right, of course we don't have color in this, but look at the hair. That looks like dreadlocks. If you can't see that, I mean, tell me what that is. That is, if that doesn't look like dreadlocks to you, then I don't know what you're seeing. But he clearly described it. Now he's drawing it. Have you ever seen any depictions of Native Americans with dreadlocks? Well, this George Catlin has clearly described it and drew it in his illustration in this book. Alright, so let's continue. And regarding the hair, Catlin continues and he says, and by passing this hair through my hands, as I often have, I have found it uniformly to be as coarse and harsh as a horse mane, differing materially from the hair of other colors, which amongst the Mandans is generally as fine and as soft as silk. And continuing right after the last passage in the same page, it says, "The reader will at once see by the above facts that there is enough upon the faces and heads of these people to stamp them peculiar when he meets them in the heart of this almost boundless wilderness, presenting such diversities of color in the complexion and hair." Some different types of shades, different colors, not just, we are seeing the general copper color, but there is light skinned, or as they call them, mulattoes in other records. And corroborating with what I just said, he's going to say it. When he knows what he has seen and what he has read, that all other primitive tribes known in America are dark copper colored with jet black hair. Again, they're basically all the primitive tribes known in America are dark copper colored with jet black hair. From these few facts alone, the reader will see that I am amongst a strange and interesting people, and know how to pardon me if I lead him through a maze of novelty and mysteries to the knowledge of a strange, yet kind and hospitable people, whose fate, like that of all their race, is sealed, whose doom is fixed to live just long enough to be imperfectly known, and then to fall before the fell disease or sword of civilizing devastation. All right, you hear what he's saying. All right, so even though he's creating, you know, he's asking for pardon if he's confusing people, if he's creating mysteries, because the way he's describing them, it basically might be controversial then and now. And just listen to how he's wording this. He's saying, whose doom is fixed to live just long enough to be imperfectly known. So they're just living long enough to be imperfectly known, meaning that they're not living long enough for us to really see who they really were, because now we know them imperfectly, right? We think Native Americans as what they show us today, and now the true aboriginals, right? That's what he's basically saying, before they fell into disease and by the sword. And continuing in this book, this is I guess a little funny part of the book, but it says here, "Through my little Pegasus seemed to dart through the clouds, and I to be wafted on the wings of Mercury. Yet my red adversary was leaving me too far behind for further competition." So right before this passage, he was explaining how he had to get naked to race. I guess I think they were racing on a horse against the Native American or the Indian, right? So he's explaining how he felt. So Pegasus is a horse, right? Mythic horse, and Mercury. He's always drawn naked, the god Mercury. So that's what he's talking about. And continues, says, "And I wheeled to the left, making a circuit on the prairie, and came in at the starting point, much to the satisfaction and exultation of the jockeys, but greatly to the murmuring disappointment of the women and children who had assembled and then strung to witness the coming out of the white medicine man. I closed myself instantly, and came back acknowledging my defeat." Alright, you hear what he's saying? "And the superior skill of my competitor, as well as the wonderful muscle of his little charger." So, regarding the little charger, he's probably talking about the Indian's private part, but I guess he's acknowledging the wonderful muscle of his little charger. you know, which pleased him much, and his sister's lamentations were soon turned to joy by the receipt of a beautiful scarlet robe and a profusion of vari-colored beads, which were speedily paraded on her copper-colored neck. So on her skin, right? Her skin, on her neck, copper-colored neck he's talking about. And I'm almost done with this book. I just wanted to continue in this part. It says, the dress, for instance, of the chief whom I have just mentioned and whose portrait I have just painted consists of a shirt or tunic made of 2 deerskins downwards, and the skins of the hind legs stitched together, the seams running down on each arm from the neck to the knuckles of the hand. This seam is covered with a band of 2 inches in width of very beautiful embroidery of porcupine quills, and suspended from the under edge of this, from the shoulders of the hands, is a fringe of the locks of black hair. Again, locks. And we ain't talking about that Goldilocks hijack, alright? So we know better now, right? Locks. So I've seen a lot of old pictures, and I got a lot of them, where they hang their, you can see something that looks like dreadlocks hanging off their coats, on their arms, on the neck, of their, sometimes of their headband. All right, so I know what this Catlin is describing, which he has taken from the heads of victims slain by his own hand in battle. So they used to grab their victims' scalps and locks, right, and hang it on their clothes, like saying, "Hey, that's me. I did that." So that's what they do to intimidate the other ones, so that people can know those are the, like, how we say in the inner cities, he got a lot of bodies on him, right? And unfortunately, but the leggings are made also of the same material, and down the outer side of the leg, from the hip to the feet, extends also similar band or belt of the same width, and wrought in the same manner, with porcupine quills and fringed with scalp locks. These locks of hair are procured from scalps and worn as trophies. Alright? As trophies. And in this part of the book, he says, "This extraordinary man is known to several gentlemen with whom I am acquainted, and particularly to Messrs. Sublette and Campbell, of whom I have before spoken, who told me they had lived in his hospitable lodge with him for months together, and assured me that they had measured his hair by correct means, and found it to be 10 feet and 7 inches in length." Alright, so let's stop there. So before this passage I was reading, he's talking about some Indian chief called Longhair. That's what he said. And they call him that. Now, I know why, but he's explaining it now. I guess because his hair was the longest of any of the Indians known throughout the whole country. And as you can see his account here from Sublette and Campbell, they're saying that it was 10 feet and 7 inches in length. Alright, so closely inspecting every part of it at the same time, and satisfying themselves that it was the natural growth. So they're saying there's no extensions in that. It's all hair, all natural. So whose hair grows like that? And now, we know a lot of Rastafaris, they have long dreadlocks, and they can wrap their hair all on top of their head and everything. And a lot of them, when they let it go, it goes really, really far. It goes really long. I mean, it's hard to have, soft hair, to hold it that long, and to be able to hold it, in one place. Like, it would be easier with dreadlocks, right? So 10 feet 7 inches in length, imagine. So picture that. All right, what are we talking about? We just talked about the coarse and harshness of the hair, right? How it was divided in plates of slab. They becoming very hard, unchanged from year to year. And we just heard the reference of locks. All right, so what are we talking about? Continuing, amongst whom is Shak E Chops, the four wolves, a fine-looking fellow, 6 feet in stature, and whose natural hair sweeps the grass as he walks. He is beautifully clad, and carries himself with the most graceful and manly mien. He is in the mourning for a brother, and according to their customs has cut off a number of locks of his long hair, which is as much as a man can well spare of so valued an ornament, which he has been for the greater part of his life cultivating. So you hear that he's saying some Indian who had really long locks, right? When he walked, it touched the ground, and it actually dragged it on the ground, on the grass, and that he's in mourning. I guess his brother died, so because of that he cut some of his locks, which to him is a lot, very sentimental thing to do, not only for his brother but for his hair, which he has been cultivating again for the greater part of his life. Dreadlocks take a long time to grow, and especially when they're really, really long, that's a long time having it like that. All right, so let me finish here. And it continues, whilst a woman who mourns for a husband or child is obliged to crop her hair short to her head, and so remain till it grows out again, ceasing gradually to mourn as her hair approaches for its former length. Alright. Alright, so if you, again, just before we finish up with this book, if you Google locks, hair, this is what you're gonna get. Alright, so what are we talking about? When they're talking about locks and it's hanging all the way down to the ground, takes a long time to grow. Some of them are 10 feet 7 inches long. Alright. And when Catlin is talking about the hair of men falling down to their hams and sometimes to the ground, and divided into plates or slabs, 2 inches wide and filled with profusion and glue of earth, which become very hard, and they remain unchanged from year to year. What is that called today? Like it says here, today this form of hair is called locks. All right, we've been hearing to the reference of locks, right? And as you can see all these different picks that they found. Archaeological, yes, archaeological Native American picks. Yes, Afro picks. I mean, just look at them, right? So it says picks found in New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. The other one, it says Susquehannock tribe hair picks, and you can see the modern Afro picks. What is the difference? I mean, come on, I didn't know this existed. They don't teach us any of this archaeology. They don't want us to relate this and put it together. But look at what they found: Afro picks in North America, right? And just to be clear again, lock of hair, it says here in Wikipedia, a lock of hair is a piece or pieces of hair that has been cut from or remains singly on a human head, most commonly bunched or tied together in some way. Bunched, what do they mean by bunched or tied together in some way? A standard dictionary definition defines a lock as a tress, a curl, or ringlet of hair. So what is curl and ringlet of hair? As you can see, ringlet and curls is almost the same as saying curl. And who usually has curls, right? Who usually has these type of hair, right? Curls or ringlets of hair, as you can see. All right, so that is a standard dictionary definition of a lock, right? And again, it most commonly bunched or tied together in some way. Lock of hair. Alright, and before I finish this video, I just want to read from the Facts on File Encyclopedia of Word and Phrase Origins, 4th edition, definitions and origins of more than 15,000 words and expressions. And let's go into it. This part right here where it says for the N-word, right? The N-word, right? When used by a white person to describe a black or African American person, this is probably the most offensive, hateful, hurtful term in the language today, like Negro. The word derives ultimately from the Latin niger, black. It is not an Americanism, the first recorded use of niger being in a 1786 poem by Robert Burns, although variations on it including negar, niger, and niger are recorded 2 centuries before then. Though African Americans do commonly use the word in different ways amongst themselves, and all the stuff we know, blacks rarely, if ever, do so in the presence of whites. Since the O.J. Simpson murder trial in 1995, when evidence of its use by a detective witness was introduced, it often has been euphemistically called the N-word. And the N-word, right, has also been an offensive derogatory term applied to Indians as well as blacks up until recent times. So I just wanted to leave you with that right there. So as you can see, the N-word, right, it was applied to Indians. This is from Encyclopedia, American Encyclopedia, right? Alright, now to corroborate with this, it says here from the historical quotes from Oxford Dictionary, 1861. Well, first of all, it talks about a letter that was written to Lincoln, where it says, H. Holzer, dear Mr. Lincoln, goddamn you are nothing but a goddamn black N-word, alright? And then it says here, a dark-skinned person of any origin. An early U.S. use, usually with reference to American Indians. Alright, so you see where the N-word was used for first. It was used to, in reference to American Indians. This is in the Oxford Dictionary. Alright, Oxford Dictionary. Look it up. Look for the book. If you have it, I wasn't able to get a physical copy or get it access to it, but it's in there. So go ahead and do the research yourself. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video. This was part 2 of Aboriginal American to African American, and I hope you stay tuned for part 3, 4, and 5. Probably a lot of parts coming, but I have a lot of info and a lot of things to continue to show you and correlate with you. We're just scratching the surface here, all the people bringing their static and their hate and their prejudice, racist comments, You want to dispute facts, you want to practice willful ignorance, that's on you. You want to live a fairy tale, or do you want to open your mind, accept this truth, this foundational truth that was forgotten, the lies, the doctrine that was established. You got to get past that. All right, we're in 2018 and everything's coming out to light. This books, the seals have been opened, so we have access to them now. So let's smart up. All right. So thank you for being here again. This is Kurimeo out. Please tune in to part 3 coming soon. Hawa.